you very much, Mayor O'Brien. I'd now like to call on Robert Fox. Now, Robert Fox is presently the head of Oxfam Canada, but in his day he was the EA for Marion Dewar. And he was the person we all went to if we wanted some money for a park or trying to work out some kind of policy, the new policy that we needed at the city. So he was very helpful in Marion's office in moving that city forward. He finally, after 20 years, got the fountain in front of City Hall working. None of us could figure out how. So, Mr. Fox.
It's a great pleasure to be here today with friends and fans of Marion Dewar for this very special occasion to dedicate this plaza. A plaza that had a lot of very special associations for Marion. It's actually just around the corner to the driveway that was Marion and Ken's first home, where they first lived together and started their family. Marion played a key role as the mayor in defending this space as a public space. It was called Cartier Square then, and all sorts of people had all sorts of plans for this square, but a lot of them actually didn't have a lot of people in those plans, and she was one of the people who made that difference. And some of you will recall that just sort of 2 years ago when the Senators were in the playoffs and there were large screens here, she was among the thousands of Ottawas who gathered here, cheering louder and prouder than anyone else, beaming that there were thousands of people here in the square to cheer on the home team. But I would say that actually in many ways what is the most important thing about this square for Marion is that it is a crossroads for the city. It is what brings the city together. It's a place of celebration, it's a place of protest, it's a place of diversity, a place of community. It's where the Labor Day parade starts, it's where the Gay Pride parade ends, it's where we have the Franco Fete, the ice sculptures, where we have multicultural festivals, and where we're right next to Ken's beloved jazz. Marion was always someone who understood in her DNA that acting locally and thinking globally were two sides of the same coin. She had a visceral understanding of issues of justice and human rights. She played an absolutely critical role within this city and globally in making a significant difference. She understood fundamentally that the obscene levels of poverty in this city and around the world says more about the rich than it does about the poor. She understood that climate change is fundamentally a human rights issue, which unfairly is affecting those who are least responsible for it most acutely. That it's not a threat looming on the horizon that we need to avert, but for a generation now, it has been what has characterized the lives of women and girls in Africa and Asia, and that we measure the impact of climate change not by the number of polar bears, but by the number of kilometers each day that women in Asia and Africa need to walk in the search to find and fetch fresh water. She understood that the leadership role and the fundamental capacity for women to change and to change the world around them, and that if we didn't have women's rights and women's equality, we could not make the fundamental changes in achieving equality, achieving human dignity to which we aspire. She understood it in her deepest core that as long as one of us is not free, we're all enslaved. And she brought to all of that a sophistication, an integrity, an agility of mind, but also a generosity of spirit that moved us and moved this city, moved the world. She was quite remarkable, as Diane said, in her time, because she made peace and justice and human rights municipal issues. But she also, on the global stage, was very powerful in making the case that taps and toilets and clinics and classrooms are absolutely fundamental to ending poverty and creating equality and that it is those day-to-day realities that are very municipal in their nature, that are absolutely so fundamental to creating the conditions in which people can secure their rights and exercise their rights and exercise their leadership globally. She had an incredible capacity to move in different spaces. She was very comfortable in boardrooms and council chambers and legislatures. But she was equally comfortable in those humble of homes, in those humble of hovels. I had the opportunity to see her in Mexico, in South Africa, in the homes of people, where I could not begin to describe to you how basic that shelter was. And her humor, her smile, her ability to listen and to learn, her ability to cut through the guff and get to the core, her values, and her determination made her absolutely befriended in those spaces. And she was always clear that as much as she was bringing to those spaces, she was taking much more from those spaces. And that's what gave her the energy to do the incredible work that she did within our community. But her courage and her creativity, her inspiration was also left with those women, those families, those communities, to applaud them on and cheer them on as they were changing their world and their reality. Her honesty, her outrage, and her generosity of spirit inspires us still. She opened her hearts and her home to the world and built in us the will to follow. And so we gather here today to celebrate a woman who was a woman of extraordinary passion and principle, a woman who, supported by Ken and her family, earned the love of her friends and the respect of her foes, a woman who we miss greatly, but a woman who will live on forever in the name of this plaza. And in doing that, creates the occasion for people of this generation and future generations to say, well, who is Marion Dewar? And to ask about her, and to grow to know her, and to follow in her example. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Robert. I'd now like to call upon Liz Dewar, who has come to town, for which we are very grateful, to say a few words on behalf of the family. Liz.